What is the primary purpose of PIPEDA, Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act? A. Regulate the use of electronic documents in business transactions. B. Protect personal health information. C. Govern how private sector organizations collect, use, and disclose personal information. And D. Set standards for public sector information practices. Correct answer, C. Govern how private sector organizations collect, use, and disclose personal information. Which of the following is considered personal information under PIPEDA? A. Information about an individual in a corporate capacity. B. Anonymous data used for statistical purposes. Employee name and title listed on a corporate website. D. An individual's home address and phone number. Correct answer, D. An individual's home address and phone number. Under PIPEDA, when can an organization disclose personal information without consent? A. When the information is publicly available. B. For marketing purposes. C. Upon the individual's request. D. For research purposes, if it is impossible to obtain consent. Correct answer, A. When the information is publicly available. What role does the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada play in the context of PIPEDA? A. Enacts privacy laws. B. Interprets privacy laws. C. Investigates complaints and enforces privacy laws. D. Regulates privacy standards within the federal government. Correct answer, C. Investigates complaints and enforces privacy laws. Under CASL, Canada's anti-spam legislation, consent to receive commercial electronic messages must be A. Implied in all business relationships. B. Verbal or written. C. Express or implied depending on the circumstances. Obtained through third-party verification. Correct answer, C. Express or implied depending on the circumstances. Which of the following is not a requirement under CASL for sending commercial electronic messages? A. Including an unsubscribe mechanism. B. Obtaining prior consent. C. Identifying the message as an advertisement. D. Providing the sender's contact information. Correct answer, C. Identifying the message as an advertisement. In the context of privacy, what is de-identification? A. Removing personal identifiers from data so that individuals cannot be identified. Encrypting data to protect it from unauthorized access. C. Destroying obsolete data securely. D. Collecting data anonymously. Correct answer, A. Removing personal identifiers from data so that individuals cannot be identified. Which statement information? Consent that must be obtained for every single use or disclosure of personal information. Correct answer, B. Consent inferred from an individual's actions or inaction. Under which circumstance can an organization collect personal information without obtaining consent under PIPEDA? A. When it is clearly in the interest of the individual and consent cannot be obtained in a timely way. For direct marketing purposes. C. When collecting information from public directories. D. All of the above. Considering Canadian and international privacy laws, what is a crucial step the corporation must take to ensure compliance? A. Obtain explicit consent from each employee. B. Ensure the data protection levels meet or exceed those required by the GDPR. C. File a general notice of transfer with the European Data Protection Board. D. Implement standard contractual clauses for all data transfers. Correct answer, B. Ensure the data protection levels meet or exceed those required by the GDPR. An online Canadian retailer experiences a data breach, resulting in the unauthorized access to customers' names, addresses, and payment information. What action is required under the Digital Privacy Act amendments to PIPEDA in response to this breach? A. Notify the affected customers within 72 hours. B. Report the breach to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada and notify affected individuals. C. Conduct an internal investigation and only notify customers if financial loss is detected. Secure the system against future breaches without the need for notifications, as no sensitive personal information was compromised. Correct answer, B. Report the breach to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada and notify affected individuals. A technology firm in Canada uses biometric data, fingerprints and facial recognition for employee access control and time tracking. An employee objects to the use of their biometric data, citing privacy concerns. Considering Canadian privacy laws, what is the firm's best course of action? A. Dismiss the employee's concerns as the use of biometric data is critical for security. B. Seek explicit consent from the employee again and explain the security measures in place to protect their data. Offer an alternative means of access control and time tracking that does not involve biometric data. D. Transfer the employee to a position that does not require access through biometric data. Correct answer. C. Offer an alternative means of access control and time tracking that does not involve biometric data. A Canadian financial services company wants to outsource the processing of customer data to a third-party service provider located in India. What must the company each time their data is accessed by the service provider? Correct answer, C, that the third-party provider adheres to PIPEDA or equivalent privacy standards. What should the company do first to rectify this situation under PIPEDA? A. Delete all unauthorized data immediately. B. Update its privacy policy to include the additional data collection. C. Obtain retroactive consent from all affected users. D. Conduct a privacy impact assessment and take corrective measures based on its findings.
A Canadian company uses drones to deliver products, capturing images of residential areas in the process. Under Canadian privacy law, what must the company ensure to comply with privacy expectations? A. The drones are only operated in commercial areas. B. Images captured by the drones are deleted immediately after delivery. C. Individuals in residential areas are notified about the drone flights and the potential for image captured. Consent is obtained from all residents in the area before using drones for delivery. Correct answer. C. Individuals in residential areas are notified about the drone flights and the potential for image capture. How does Canadian privacy law view the collection of employee personal information through wearable technology in the workplace? A. It is permissible without consent if it is strictly for workplace safety. B. Consent must be obtained, and employees must be informed about how the information will be used. C. It is considered a violation of privacy and is generally prohibited. D. Employers can collect this information without restrictions as part of employment agreements. Correct answer. B. Consent must be obtained, and employees must be informed about how the information will be used. A Canadian retail company offers a loyalty program that tracks customers' purchasing behavior. Under PIPEDA, what principle is most directly related to this practice? A. Accountability. B. Identifying purposes. C. Consent. D. Limiting use, disclosure, and retention. Correct answer. C. Consent. Under PIPEDA, when must an organization make its privacy policy available to the public? A. Upon request only. B. At the time of collecting personal information. C. In its annual report. D. On its website and in its physical locations. Correct answer. D. On its website and in its physical locations. A Canadian non-profit organization collects personal information from donors. What requirement under PIPEDA applies to this scenario? A. Non-profit organizations are exempt from PIPEDA. B. The organization must have a public privacy policy even though it is a non-profit. C. Consent for collecting, using, and disclosing personal information is not required for non-profits. D. Personal information can be used for any purpose as long as it supports the non-profit's objectives. Correct answer. B. The organization must have a public privacy policy even though it is a non-profit. Which of the following scenarios represents a breach of PIPEDA? A. An organization collects extra personal information for a legitimate business purpose but fails to obtain consent for the additional collection. B. A company uses personal information for a purpose for which consent was obtained, but the individual decides they no longer wish to participate. C. Personal information is collected from publicly available sources without individual consent. D. An organization securely destroys personal information that is no longer needed for the purposes for which it was collected. Correct answer. A. An organization collects extra personal information for a legitimate business purpose but fails to obtain consent for the additional collection. A data breach occurs at a Canadian financial institution, exposing customer financial data. Under PIPEDA, what is not a required response by the institution? A. Conducting a thorough investigation to understand the breach's scope. B. Notifying the affected customers immediately upon discovery of the breach. C. Reporting the breach to the relevant authorities, including the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. D. Publicly disclosing the details of the breach, including the number of customers affected. Correct answer. D. Publicly disclosing the details of the breach, including the number of customers affected. What principle under PIPEDA requires an organization to maintain personal information in a manner that allows an individual to obtain access to their information and challenge its accuracy? A. Openness. B. Individual access. C. Accuracy. D. Challenging compliance. Correct answer B. Individual access. A company in Canada uses an automated decision-making process to evaluate loan applications. Under PIPEDA, what rights do individuals have regarding this process? A. The right to know the reasons if their application is denied based on the automated decision. B. The right to opt out of automated decision-making processes. C. The right to have a human review all automated decisions. D. The right to have their personal information excluded from the automated decision-making process. Correct answer A. The right to know the reasons if their application is denied based on the automated decision. Under Canadian privacy law, when can an organization refuse an individual's request for access to their personal information? A. When the information is protected by attorney-client privilege. B. If the individual has not paid a fee for access. C. When the request is considered frivolous or vexatious. D. Both A and C. Correct answer D. Both A and C. A Canadian organization plans to implement facial recognition technology for security purposes. Under PIPEDA, what is a critical consideration before deployment? A. The technology must be able to differentiate between employees and visitors. B. Consent must be obtained from all individuals who will be subject to facial recognition. C. The organization must ensure that the technology is 100% accurate. D. Facial recognition data must be stored for at least 5 years for auditing purposes. Correct answer B. Consent must be obtained from all individuals who will be subject to facial recognition. How does PIPEDA define sensitive information, and what implications does this have for how it should be treated? A. Information about an individual's health, finances, or ethnicity. It requires a higher level of protection. B. Any information that can be used to identify an individual, treated the same as any personal information. C. Information collected online, requiring explicit consent for its use. Employee information, which is exempt from consent requirements. Correct answer A. Information about an individual's health, finances, or ethnicity. It requires a higher level of protection. What does the principle of openness under PIPEDA require of organizations? A. To be transparent about policies and practices related to the management of personal information. B. To open their records to the public upon request. C. To notify individuals immediately upon collecting their personal information. D. To make their privacy policies open for public comment before implementation. Correct answer A. To be transparent about policies and practices related to the management of personal information. Under PIPEDA, what does the principle of consent require for the collection, use, or disclosure of personal information in the course of commercial activities? A. Consent must be obtained after the information is collected, but before it is USED. B. Consent must be implied for all commercial activities. C. Consent must be expressed for sensitive information and can be implied for less sensitive information. D. Organizations must obtain consent for the collection and use of personal information, but not for disclosure. Correct answer C. Consent must be expressed for sensitive information and can be implied for less sensitive information. When is it acceptable under Canadian privacy law for an organization to disclose personal information to a third party without consent? A. When the third party is an affiliate of the organization. B. For the purposes of collecting a debt owed by the individual to the organization. C. When the individual has previously consented to similar disclosures. D. Always, as long as the third party agrees to use the information only for the purposes for which it was originally collected. Correct answer B. For the purposes of collecting a debt owed by the individual to the organization.
What is the purpose of the Privacy Act in Canada? A. To regulate how businesses can collect, use, and disclose personal information. B. To provide individuals with rights concerning their personal information held by government institutions. C. To outline the responsibilities of provincial privacy commissioners. D. To establish privacy standards for private sector organizations. Correct answer B. To provide individuals with rights concerning their personal information held by government institutions. What does consent mean under PIPEDA? A. An organization's right to use personal information as it sees fit. B. An individual's voluntary agreement to the collection, use, and disclosure of their personal information. C. A legal mechanism for government agencies to access personal information. D. The act of anonymizing personal information to use it without individual consent. Correct answer B. An individual's voluntary agreement to the collection, use, and disclosure of their personal information. Under PIPEDA, how should organizations handle the accuracy of personal information? A. Personal information must be kept accurate, complete, and up to date as necessary for its intended use. B. Organizations are only required to update personal information upon the request of the individual. C. Accuracy is not a concern as long as the information was collected with consent. D. Organizations can assume the accuracy of information collected from public sources. Correct answer. A. Personal information must be kept accurate, complete, and up-to-date as necessary for its intended use. Which of the following best describes the principle of limiting collection under PIPEDA? A. Organizations should limit the amount of information disclosed to third parties. B. Organizations must only collect information that is necessary for the purposes identified by the organization. C. The collection of personal information should be limited to what is necessary for research purposes. D. Personal information should not be collected by organizations without governmental oversight. Correct answer. B. Organizations must only collect information that is necessary for the purposes identified by the organization. How does the GDPR's requirement for data protection by design and by default apply to Canadian organizations? A. It applies only to organizations operating within the European Union. B. Canadian organizations must comply when processing the data of EU citizens, regardless of the organization's location. C. It is a recommendation but not a requirement for Canadian organizations. D. This requirement is superseded by PIPEDA for Canadian companies. Correct answer. B. Canadian organizations must comply when processing the data of EU citizens, regardless of the organization's location. What are the consequences of non-compliance with CASL? A. Mandatory data protection audits every year. B. Financial penalties and legal action. C. Immediate revocation of the organization's business license. Public disclosure of the violation by the government. Correct answer. B. Financial penalties and legal action. In what scenario might an organization be permitted to collect personal information without consent under PIPEDA? A. When the information is collected for the purpose of selling it to third parties. B. If the information is necessary to prevent an imminent threat to an individual's life or security. C. For the purpose of employee monitoring in the workplace. D. When collecting information from social media profiles for marketing. Correct answer. B. If the information is necessary to prevent an imminent threat to an individual's life or security. A Canadian organization intends to implement a new HR system that involves the transfer of employee personal information to a service provider in another country. Under PIPEDA, what must the organization ensure before proceeding with the transfer? A. That the service provider is located in a country with laws considered adequate by the European Union. B. The employees have been informed about the transfer and the organization has obtained their consent. C. That the service provider only uses the information for the purposes explicitly agreed upon. D. All of the above. Correct answer. B. The employees have been informed about the transfer and the organization has obtained their consent. A Canadian company is fined for not obtaining explicit consent before sending commercial electronic messages. This enforcement action was under A. PIPEDA. B. The Privacy ACTC, CASL. D. GDPR. Correct answer. C. CASL. What is required for an organization to demonstrate accountability under PIPEDA? A. Having a privacy policy available on their website. B. Appointing a chief privacy officer, CPO. C. Developing and implementing comprehensive privacy policies and practices, including appointing a person responsible for the organization's compliance. D. Conducting annual privacy training for employees. Correct answer. C. Developing and implementing comprehensive privacy policies and practices, including appointing a person responsible for the organization's compliance. In a scenario where a Canadian telecommunications company wishes to use existing customer data for a new purpose, what is the best course of action to comply with PIPEDA? A. Proceed with the new use, as the data was already collected. B. Notify customers of the new use and provide an opt-out option. C. Obtain explicit consent from customers for the new use. Anonymize the data before using it for the new purpose. Correct answer. C. Obtain explicit consent from customers for the new use. A cloud storage provider headquartered in Canada stores data in data centers located in multiple countries. Under PIPEDA, what is required of a provider regarding personal information of Canadian citizens? A. Inform users that the data may be stored outside of Canada and subject to foreign laws. B. Store data of Canadian citizens exclusively in Canada. C. Encrypt all data stored in foreign data centers. D. Obtain consent from users every time data is transferred to a different country. Correct answer. A. Inform users that the data may be stored outside of Canada and subject to foreign laws. An organization's employee loses a laptop containing unencrypted personal information of customers. What is the first action the organization should take in compliance with PIPEDA? A. Assess the potential harm to affected individuals. B. Notify the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada on potentially affected individuals. C. Replace the lost laptop with a new, encrypted device. Conduct a security audit to prevent future losses. Correct answer. B. Notify the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada on potentially affected individuals. A marketing firm in Canada uses personal information collected from social media to create targeted advertising campaigns without user consent. This practice is A. Allowed under PIPEDA if the information is publicly available. B. A violation of PIPEDA's consent principle. C. Only permissible if the information is anonymized. D. Considered standard practice and therefore exempt from PIPEDA. Correct answer. B. A violation of PIPEDA's consent principle. Under what condition can a business disclose personal health information without consent under Canadian privacy law? A. When disclosing to another healthcare provider for the purpose of providing healthcare. B. For marketing purposes, if the information has been anonymized. C. Upon request from law enforcement without a warrant. D. For research purposes, without any safeguards. Correct answer. A. When disclosing to another healthcare provider for the purpose of providing healthcare. A Canadian online retailer tracks customers' browsing behavior on its website without informing them or obtaining their consent. According to PIPEDA, this practice is A. Acceptable, as browsing information is not considered personal information. B. Permissible if the information is used solely for improving website functionality. C. A violation of the consent principle. Allowed, provided the information is anonymized before analysis. Correct answer. C. A violation of the consent principle. A Canadian bank uses AI algorithms to make lending decisions based on customers' personal and financial information. What principle of PIPEDA must the bank be particularly cautious about in this scenario? A. Openness. B. Consent. C. Individual access. D. Challenging compliance. Correct answer. B. Consent. A social media company in Canada plans to introduce a new feature that analyzes users' messages to suggest products they might like. Under PIPEDA, what is a key consideration for the company before launching this feature? A. Ensuring that the feature is only available to users over the age of 18. B. Obtaining explicit consent from users for the specific use of their personal information. C. Limiting the analysis to messages that mention specific brands. D. Providing an option for users to opt out of the feature after it has been introduced. Correct answer. B. Obtaining explicit consent from users for the specific use of their personal information. Which of the following is an example of implied consent under PIPEDA? A. A customer providing their email address to a retailer for the purpose of receiving a newsletter. B. An individual clicking on a link in a privacy policy that leads to a consent for MC. A user's continued use of a website after being informed of its use of cookies for tracking. D. Signing a physical document that includes consent for data processing activities. Correct answer. C. A user's continued use of a website after being informed of its use of cookies for tracking. A Canadian company conducts a contest on social media, collecting participants' names and email addresses. Under PIPEDA, what must the company ensure regarding the use of this information? A. It can use the information for marketing purposes without further consent. B. It must destroy the information immediately after the contest concludes. C. It can only use the information for the purpose of the contest unless it obtains further consent for additional uses. D. It must share the information with all contest participants. Correct answer. C. It can only use the information for the purpose of the contest unless it obtains further consent for additional uses. Under which conditions can an organization use de-identified information without consent under PIPEDA? A. For any purpose, as long as the information is de-identified. B. Only for research or statistical purposes where it is not feasible to obtain consent. C. For internal training purposes. D. To comply with legal obligations. Correct answer. B. Only for research or statistical purposes where it is not feasible to obtain consent. A Canadian company's website uses cookies to track user behavior. Under CASL, what is required for this practice to be compliant? A. The company must obtain express consent from users before placing cookies. B. Users must be notified about the use of cookies and given the option to opt out. C. The company must provide detailed instructions on how users can delete cookies. D. Consent for cookies is implied, so no specific action is required. Correct answer. B. Users must be notified about the use of cookies and given the option to opt out. In the context of employee privacy, what is a key consideration for employees under Canadian privacy law when monitoring employee emails? A. Employees must be notified about monitoring in advance. B. Consent from employees is not required if the monitoring is for business purposes. C. Monitoring is only permissible if it is conducted by an external third party. D. Employees can monitor emails without restriction as long as they own the email system. Correct answer. A. Employees must be notified about monitoring in advance. What is required under PIPEDA for an organization to disclose personal information to law enforcement without consent? A. The organization must have a warrant issued by a court. B. Disclosure is permitted if it is reasonable to expect that obtaining consent would compromise the investigation. C. The individual must be notified about the disclosure in advance. Law enforcement must provide a written request specifying the information needed. Correct answer. B. Disclosure is permitted if it is reasonable to expect that obtaining consent would compromise the investigation. When conducting a privacy impact assessment, PIA, what is a critical element to consider for compliance with PIPEDA? A. The potential impact of the project on the organization's financial status. B. The privacy risks associated with the project and measures to mitigate these risks. C. The technological feasibility of the project. D. The duration of the project and its alignment with business goals. Correct answer. B. The privacy risks associated with the project and measures to mitigate these risks.